It's recording. Hi, my name is Yasna, and today I'm gonna talk about how essentially the modern world broke my young mind. Obviously, I did not really think all the things I'm gonna say through, and I didn't really take notes as of bullet points what I'm about to say. For the ones who don't know me, I'm 20, and I started social media from when I was about 16. Last year, due to some personal difficulties, I had to delete my account. And my first language is not English, and I don't live in a first world country. I live in a third world country, and how I was raised is my sister trying to feed English down my throat, even like by violence. So I just grew up with English in my mind, and I'm most comfortable when I'm talking in English. So that's why. For my Persian audience had followed me before this particular video, سلام بچه‌ها، حالتون چطوره؟ من قراره کلا انگلیسی حرف بزنم چون اینطوری راحت‌ترم و راحت‌تر میتونم رشته افکارم رو دنبال کنم. So yeah. The first point what I want to mention is Instagram and my upbringing. So when I was 16, I created this account called the Wendy Miller, and later on I changed it to Chewbacca. So if anyone's familiar with that ID, to be particular, that was what I was going with. To this day on, I don't have a good sense of what is a good username and what gets you clout, essentially, and what makes you recognizable. Also, from a young age, I had this idea that your given name at birth or your original name is not gonna get you the spotlight you need, and you need to separate your egos aside and save your name for yourself, and then have this creation of your alter ego and present your stage self into the world with that name. Instagram. I created this account when I was 16. That's the third time I mentioned that, maybe fourth. And I wanted to basically help people in a world that I felt like I didn't have anyone to look up to with the same problems I was going through. And for a 16-year-old to be thinking that's like fucked up. That's like, I didn't even know what my comfort zone was, and then I created this whole platform to just teach girls and guys my own age. Obviously, me starting out, didn't have much guidance, and back in 2016, I was a kid of like Tumblr and like just watching My Little Pony on YouTube, and I didn't really know much about social media and YouTubers and vloggers that I was streaming, I guess, had different lives than I did, and I never really started YouTube on that level. However, I am trying to rant here, and by just observing, I got to know the fact that ranting and complaining will get you views. And so for a while I was actually pretty much doing that, which is again a little fucked up, but like no one in my family had been educated in like social media literacy. No one in my whole relatives that I know of really had that, and I had to learn many things by myself. However, my sister did help me a lot through it all. Not that she really could, because like she's more of a very much of an introvert. I'm an ambivert, and I'm extroverted, but like I need my own time, I need my own space. The things that I had to learn all by myself, which I'm thankful enough for my genes to be smart and observant, and someone who has the comprehension of essentially just noticing things, noticing algorithms, for example. I got familiar with the fact that I found out how you can get views, what kind of content gets you views, and even though I wasn't really following that, I was just like trying to be true to myself. I was smart enough to know if I'm being true to myself, how can I also get views, which doesn't really help necessarily, but like you get a pretty much good idea about it. And so social media became like my job full time for about like 4 years. Later on, I got a corporate 9 to 5 job, and I was doing UI UX graphic design as an intern. And later on, I was managing all their social media, not getting paid for it at all, for 5 straight months. And that was when I was like, okay, like this is not paying, this is not okay. And at that point I was 19, and I had to essentially delete my accounts on social media. It's not that big if you think about it, but is also not that small either. And I was like a smaller creator. I would like make videos, I would make DIY videos, and I'm very interested in like music and performative arts, and I was trying to share that, but where I live, that's not very welcoming for you as a woman to do. Which brings me to my next point, real life. As a person who'd been active on social media, and all my income was coming from social media and advertising and like brand deals and marketing different things, and to like girls and boys my age, mostly girls, and having lost that audience, I got to the point where I chose to get into real life, do real experiences that I've seen as a child that I really wanted to experience, like working in cafes. And I thankfully did find a very good job as a waitress in a cafe downtown, and I'm really grateful to the time I had there. My friends and my coworkers that worked there at the same time as I did didn't have as much as a good experience as I did, and I was truly looking at it from a point of not necessarily income, but more of an experience and a life experience. And I had gone through some difficulties in my personal life with friends, as we all do. I was 19. I needed an escape, and the place I started working at was very home-like. And they would keep on saying that we're a family, and family is all that matters. And I know that's a red flag, and I did recognize that, and I knew that I'm probably walking into a toxic dynamic of people working together. However, knowing that, I walked in and I worked there for like 3 months, gained a lot of good experience, got to the fact that I really like working with people and talking to people, and pretty much essentially gaining a knowledge about myself. Plus, I think the word of the day is essentially, because I'm using it way too frequently, and yeah, that's the word of the day. Later on, then again, I think I did lost myself a little back there. It was near my birthday, my 20th, this past year. I'm 20, going on 21, which is not that old if you think about it. Going on 20 was such a big deal for me, because I never thought that I'd be 20 and still in this country. And since a very young age, I was just up for immigration. And since I was 8, I was like every year constantly saying goodbye to people, because I thought I will not have another year here. And I would say goodbye to my friends, my teachers, many classes I never attended again, because I was still here. And just last semester I had said goodbyes, and that I will be leaving this country soon. And me being 20 and not leaving the country, dealing with my sexuality, my friendships, my interpersonal relationships, workspace, literal traumas, and had like stopped going to therapy, but like tried to gain my self-confidence back, something I never dealt with. My 16-year-old self never dealt with self-esteem or self-confidence issues, which was one thing that attracted my audience in the first place. And at this point, I was becoming 20 and had a lot of self-esteem issues and self-image issues, which I will get to later on. And then I started working at another cafe, and as a barista, and that was a good experience, but I wasn't getting paid enough, and I was working myself to death with 3 other jobs. And I was like, okay, so I'm a workaholic. I don't even enjoy it, and I need to be stopping. And there's this word in Persian, betolat, which essentially means just wasting your time and bed rotting. And I realized that since a very, very young age, maybe like since I was 9-ish, I never just wasted my time, and I was never bored. My third point, boredom. I was born in 2004. I'm very luckily one of the last people who remember a life outside of social media. And I remember dialogue internet, I remember VHS and VHS tapes, and I remember a time where I didn't have a phone. I wasn't allowed on the phone, and the only time I would use the phone, that was very small, and it was like a very small Nokia or Samsung, I'm not really sure. The only times I was allowed to use it was when I was essentially wanting to call my parents to pick me up from somewhere. We weren't even allowed to take phones to school. I don't know if in any other countries people were allowed to bring phones into the school back then, like 2008, 2010, but we weren't. And I don't think in the country I grew up in, like we still can. I don't know. So if you know that, if you have that information, if you're I don't know, a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old going to school still, let me know if you can bring your phones to school, like not just as in sneak it in, but like, are you allowed to? Down in the comments. Thank you. Boredom was something I'm familiar with. I grew up with it. I know how to be bored. I know when I'm bored, I can pick something up and actually do it. Or just if I'm procrastinating a chore, I could essentially start doing that chore if I'm bored, out of just like misery, plain misery. What I'm noticing in kids nowadays is that they don't have that luxury. They don't know what being bored is. It's how we all are so addicted to this dopamine hits that we get from our phones. I'm a victim myself, honestly, and I truly haven't found a way to deal with it yet. But I notice in kids how they can't just separate real world from Instagram, YouTube, and other social media apps. And I appreciate the fact that I was born in a time which I had that luxury, which I don't see being present now in our day-to-day. I'm trying to essentially build on to this habits where I'm just bored. I'm not scrolling, which I'm not really successful at, let me say that. But like, I'm trying my best. So I can actually pick up an instrument again. I can actually sit down and write or draw or create something. Or even have my own thoughts. Which brings me to my next point. Intellect. I feel like I'm truly doing this on an easy way manner. Like, remember when she would just like write on papers and be like, my next point. So, intellect. By intellect, I don't mean that you should necessarily be smart. It's creative ways of thinking, which is when we consume a media, any form of it, either it's music, a YouTube video, a series, a film, books, just newspaper, just plain news, and really take that deep down and interpret it as what we are and how we take it as. It's just, I personally have been on the internet for long enough to know that I don't really have my own thoughts. Even if I think I'm smart, I'm not really being smart and creative with the things that I'm thinking of. I'm not coming up with these ideas. However, I do hear someone talking about it on social media about a simple matter, and I'm like, okay, I do agree on that, which is not completely wrong, because in the old ancient days, that's how people operated too. They would relate with something on a personal level that they found sense with, and they would take it as their own opinion. However, not every single thought that I have is my own, and I would like to think myself as an independent thinker, which I'm not really sure I am at this point. The confession I have to make here is that I now look at people and I am pitying them for the fact that I think I'm smarter for noticing all of this. Where I was much younger, and I really don't need to talk about how this makes sense in my brain. And if I want to make a conversation, I have to talk about something that down the line makes sense for the other person. And we would just like talk about a fact that I'm very clearly have a big bright idea about, but this person that I'm talking to does not have that. Therefore, I need to be discussing something very simple with them that I don't find intellectually stimulating for myself in order to build a relationship with a human being that is sitting literally in front of me. The next point I'm trying to get to is perceptions and judgments, essentially. Then again, essentially is the word of the day, so get on with it. I'm gonna use it way too many times now. I, as a young kid, as a young teenager, never really dealt with how people perceived me, or looked at me, or looked down upon me, or just judged me. I didn't care about that because I grew up with that. I grew up with being more comfortable with English and having not lived in another country rather than the same one I'm living in as if right now. Kids my age bullied me so damn hard, and I don't get why right now, but back then I was very bright with it. I don't know how. And I was always like, okay, I get that. This kid is insecure. This kid is projecting and thinks that I'm looking down on them, while it feels like I'm judging them and I'm looking down upon them, while not really see themselves as the place I am right now in life. Or other than that, I was just weird for kids, and I get that. And all my life I've been weird, and I've been an outcast in outcast communities, whom are theatrical people in entertainment business that go through existential crises and identity crises on a daily basis, and they're actors and they play other roles in order to find out who they are on a deeper level, who they actually are deep down inside, and they try to just find an identity that they relate to. And in those communities, I'm still an outcast, and I don't see how that's possible, because in other countries, I think I'm viewed as very normal. I look like a white bisexual, which is not completely incorrect. That's how I look like, and how I will be perceived as in other countries, but not in the third world country which I live in. And perceptions in social media started to ruin how my brain operated on a very basic level. I'm out of breath. So I didn't receive much hate in social media. However, I was becoming so insecure with how I was looking, how I should be looking, why I really don't look like the other straight, cisgender, plain ass bloggers and vloggers. And I wasn't that. I was a creative person that was interested in various topics, and I wanted to share that. And even when I met people that looked like me, they never thought like me. They weren't as smart as I am. I'm not being condescending, but they couldn't even hold down a conversation. And I would try so hard to fit in. And at some point in content creating and like becoming someone in the creative world of social media, you're not just making content for your followers. At some point, you start doing it for other creators, which I've seen multiple times. It's like I'm talking to a friend, we're planning our next posts essentially, And we're not thinking of like how my followers will view me. How can I gain more followers? At this point, you found a content creator whose job is better than you, not even necessarily, but they have a bigger, more massive following, and they're younger than you are, they're dumber than you are, they're not as pretty as you are, whatever you view yourself as, and they're not just like in your level. Leveling yourself and others ruins my brain. And it's not just a comparison that just fucks you up. It's everything combined all together, and you have to take it all in. And at that point, you're just creating a certain type of content in order for that person that is also a creator to see you and notice you, or become friends, become frenemies even, and just coexist with one another. You can really confide in deep down, but have to overcome at some point. And why now I'm not friends with many people that I got friends with because of my social media is that they're all very basic people that love to compare themselves and others to others, and stuck in a loop of data, numbers, and status, which is completely fake. I next want to talk about Burnham and why I relate with him so goddamn much. This dude was a kid on a verge of success at a very young age, and he didn't even see himself as being worthy of the fame he got, because what he was talking about was so basic to him as a person, and it was just common sense to him, that when people found it entertaining, funny, stimulating, he was so shocked and surprised, because he viewed himself as just another plain white guy that has a lot of privilege, which is true to an extent. And he got to a place that he was being interviewed multiple times in various talk shows and hosting shows while having panic attacks and anxiety attacks and going through such a hard time with his mental health, still speaking truth about what was just so common, and no one seemed to talk about it. Later on, he just gave up, he disappeared, and I get that, I respect that. That's the same thing I did. However, it's not very comparable, because like he had much more of a bigger audience, and he lived in a first world country, which I didn't have that following. I'm not as big as he is. I don't think I'll ever be that big and that influential. Let's not jinx it. But it's strange how the common sense he was talking as, and how he was being creative with the common sense, wasn't really common for everyone. And that is my next point. Common sense isn't really common. As someone who was creating for a niche audience, I would say indie kids of 2020, if you remember how that looked like. I just hope none of y'all go through 2020 ever again if you're younger than I am and didn't really go through with it. I lost my high school experience to COVID, essentially, and I didn't make much friends. I never dated anyone in my teen years because COVID, and I'm not very much of a chatty person. Like, I don't like chat rooms and meeting people online, really. I'm very grounded in finding ways to stay human. Anyways, I'm getting further from the point. Common sense isn't really common. I think to be an influential person in the media, and by media, I just don't mean social media, and the pace of our world, of our humanity, in a pace where we evolved as a species, people who were smarter, who were more observant, and could pick up on common sense, quote unquote, were the ones that got to lead other people through everything. And if I can understand people being more dumb in our history, it's mostly because people were just trying to survive and we weren't civilized yet to that extent. And man made religion, and religion was made for other men and for dumber people to be controlled by it. This is also something that should be common sense, but apparently it's not, because I can easily talk to a person who is my age, who is 2021, and is religious, and does not accept the fact that religion was made for control of mass consumption, massive population. I feel like I'm talking incorrectly in grammatical terms. I don't know why. So this is not really common sense. And for me to think that social media is pretty much consuming you from inside out and just sucking every little thought you have, and whatever feeling you have, and whatever humanity you still try to hold on to, social media will suck it out of you if it actually like past a point. That's not common knowledge either. Like, me talking to a normal cisgendered low class, middle class even, or even high class Persian right now, they don't know how social media is consuming their everyday life and sucking life out of them. We don't notice that, and I'm terrified of that. I'm terrified not just because how social media operates. I'm terrified of the world, the modern world that we live in operates. Back in 2000s and 2010s, we had magazines and industry plans of music, TV stars, and all of that. A big corporation would essentially just tell you what you should like and what pop culture actually genuinely is. And with the gift of internet, people outspoke their own truth and how they viewed people in the industry, and how and whom they actually genuinely liked, which what we're seeing right now. Like, pop stars don't just consist of Britney Spears lookalikes anymore, or Madonna lookalikes anymore. It's Chappell Roan, Sabrina Carpenter, and Charlie XCX, people who come from very different aesthetics and very different worldviews, and people now can choose who they like as in pop culture, if you suppose. And even though I'm very grateful and appreciative of the fact that we're being way more smarter with what we choose on a day-to-day basis, I don't appreciate how we also don't recognize how social media, and not just social media, how the modern world just works, is sucking life out of us. Now to my last and most important point, self-criticism. I'm very self-critical. A part of it comes from my childhood and my sister, who tried to raise me as best as I could be. And the other part really truly does come from social media, and there's a small little gap that came from just the modern world. The world where I grew up, self-criticism is not just a way of thinking. It's not a mentality or a lifestyle choice. It's a should. And to an extent, it is good. It is meant for growth and becoming better and becoming simply a better version of yourself. However, you're supposed to critic how skinny or fat you are, tall or small you are, how you look like, how does your eyelids look? Do you have a bunny face or a fox face? Or do you have an often siren aesthetic? Do you have, do you genuinely enjoy art? Do you actually understand it? If you're wearing a Nirvana t-shirt, can you name 3 songs? And it's just being self-critical that ruins me. And I understand how this is just like me ranting about my bad habits, but it's not just that. It's the world I grew up in and I'm living in right now, that I should be self-critical. I should be self-aware, which is great, but self-criticism can lead to being self-destructive very easily. And a younger person than I am would not necessarily all the time understand the fact that this is eating them up, and it's not being self-critical for the better, it's just being for the worse. Even in this very long YouTube video I think that I just recorded right now, there's various parts where the way I'm speaking, the way I'm thinking, and how I should be explaining everything. Even though I think I'm doing a very good job, considering how I haven't really filmed myself talking in 2 years now, and really haven't sat down and talked to the camera and other people. So when I started my Instagram page, I was a victim to, I don't know if we have, it's the same phrase as we use in Persian, but روانشناسی زرد, meaning yellow psychology. It essentially came from the fact that inspirational and motivation books and the psychological books that like were just very basic to dehumanizing level, is that a correct word? I don't even, those were published in very low quality paper that were yellowish, therefore we say yellow psychology. So I was a victim to yellow psychology. I was like, wow, get up in the morning, sun is saying hi to you, go girly. Like, if you're on your period, don't let that stop you. Just like wake up at 5 a.m, just learn and be positive. Like, keep every negative person out of your life. Me being a negative person myself would say that. And I was just a victim to that, and I really couldn't do anything about that. Coming out of that, there was people that were like, you shouldn't be following that kind of shit, that's stupid, you shouldn't limit yourself, you shouldn't blah blah blah. And both these points teared me up emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, because one side of me turned into this positive, like, put every single negative thing out of your life, and this part of me was like, just live, don't limit yourself, just be yourself. And these were very extreme, which I had to find a balance in between, which essentially is correct, but just hurt me apart. And it's because of the modern world we live in. It's very radical in both perspectives of one topic, and everyone is just trying to fight with each other all the time, and it's exhausting, and no one really notices it. And we're being way too self-critical, which doesn't even let you just live your life, which you cannot even argue with any point of that. Like, you know, I'm done. I'm honestly done. Like, it's so hard to explain, and anyone who has gotten my points to this point get it, and anyone that doesn't get it. But trying to just get to the fact that we're being way too self-critical, way too harsh to ourselves and to the world we're living in. And it's not just ourselves at some other point. Like, it's not just like being harsh to ourselves at some point, it's being harsh to everyone around us, and trying to project every single feeling we have onto other people and force them into liking something or disliking something without even noticing it. And it's not like we're forcing people, it's just we're being way too enthusiastic to some people that will not change their mind and will be more resistant in the future about the topic you're passionate about. So yeah. Now the conclusion. The conclusion is that I don't have a conclusion. I was pretty much just ranting and trying to make the very little amount of people that are gonna watch my video be more present. Be more present in their way of thinking, be more creative and critical of their way of thinking. Notice when a thought is not your own thought, and how social media or just consumption of a media had made you think that, and it necessarily isn't going to be your own view or perspective of that particular topic. And essentially and conclusively, I do want to start a series to talk about the things I'm very interested in. Is mostly about pop culture and how it affects us, and how, I don't know, like I would want to talk about Sex and the City, or how shoes became shoes, or why do we just wear socks and not socks that have fingers on them, you know? I would love to talk about those stuff, and I was being way too self-critical and way too perfectionist to start with just a topic, and I couldn't really choose. And so I thought the best way of starting that is me just ranting for a little bit of how the modern world did ruin my ways of thinking and my young mind, and how I will be talking in this series eventually, and just for y'all to get a little bit of, you know, insight of what my way of thinking and my way of talking and mannerisms truly are. Thank you for watching this video. Just like every other YouTuber, I have to say this. If you stayed till here, I'm very thankful and appreciative that you did listen to me. Smash that like button and comments, we can interact. And if you have any more points to add, I know I wasn't really being cohesive with what I was saying, but I think to an extent it's understandable what point I'm trying to get to. If you have anything to add, leave it in the comments. I will be reading it. And share this with a friend of yours that is actually as smart as you are and I am. Yeah. So yeah. Love y'all so much, and hope to see you soon too again. And yeah. Have a good day.